So the last chapter, like I said, is an important chapter. Again, we find that how talked over several times, talked about how Jeremiah had died according to tradition, and I believe that he finished his words to the people. Then he went back and got these prophecies to Babylon that he'd made before they went into Egypt. And so he talks about Babylon before they'd gone. He gave this to Zedekiah before. It's interesting how God's just dovetailing this whole thing. That he's got these prophecies to Babylon before Babylon has come, that Babylon is going to fall. And he's going to bring them back. He even said that he was going to bring them back. And so he's going to judge Babylon. But we go back and we end the book with a historical narrative that really doesn't have. It's the first time we're going historical that didn't have Jeremiah in there. This is just about Zedekiah. The last, of course, he was the puppet king. He was not a legal king of heir. He did not get there by being an heir of Jehoiakim. He was actually Jehoiakim's brother. He was Jehoiachin's uncle. He was put in place by Nebuchadnezzar. And then he rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar. And then that's when Nebuchadnezzar came down against Babylon, and of course Zedekiah leaves. He finds him in Ramah. He brings him back, I think, to Gilboa, and kills all of his sons, kills the nobles that are with him, and puts his eyes out and takes him off to Babylon, and he dies there. Jehoiachin stays, oddly enough. Jehoiachin stays, and I'm going to cover this in a minute, but he goes off. He's the ex-king, and he goes off, and he's 18 when he becomes king. Sometime in the next few years, he is taken off to Babylon. And when he is 55, he's in there for 37 years. Not 30, 35, 37 years. So I was figuring he was at least in his late 50s. For this man to be in captivity, and that didn't mean he was in a dungeon eating gruel or anything, but he wasn't able to freely roam, and he didn't have a lot of respect. He gets lifted up by a guy named Evil-Merodach, and that's just his name. So what happens is Zedekiah was 21 years old and he started to reign, and we're quoting, like I said, 2 Kings 24:18 through 25:30 exactly. And he goes in, and who he is, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord, according to all that Jehoiakim had done. And the anger of the Lord came to pass in Jerusalem and Judah. And he rebelled against the king of Babylon. This is historical also. This is recorded also by Josephus. And Josephus even witnessed what is happening. Oh, actually, no, he witnessed what happened with Titus Vespasian at the 9th of Av. I'm getting my 9th of Avs confused. But he was a historian who documented this also from other sources that back up what happened here. In the 10th month, on the 10th day of the month, they started to siege, and it went to the 11th year, so to the 9th of Av. So it went for about a year and a half that they did this siege and finally broke in. Like I said, they've been building battlements. You could see them coming. It wasn't like they got there overnight and climbed over the walls. They were out there, like I said, eating an apple, saying, we're on our way. And they besieged, and in the 4th month and the 9th day of the month, it was sore, and there was no bread for the people, and the city was broken up. And the army pursued after Zedekiah, because Zedekiah leaves now. He abandons ship. He's gone. And that's when Babylon came and slew his sons and all the nobles and took out his eyes and took him to Babylon. And on the 5th month, in the 10th day of the month, in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, came Nebuzaradan. This is the one, Nebuzaradan, which is the one that took care of Jeremiah. They said, okay, you can go, or you can stay and let Gedaliah take care of you. So you can stay or you can go. And decides to stay. So he mentions this, and he is the one who burned the house of the Lord, and he burned it with fire, and the army of the Chaldees broke down the walls of Jerusalem, and this Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried away certain of the poor, but he left the residue of the people, and left Jeremiah with that residue. We also go how he destroyed the temple, how he took the pillars, how they went in and looted everything. Again, there is no mention of the Ark of the Covenant here. We don't know what happened to the Ark of the Covenant. We know that it's not here. Maybe after Hezekiah, they saw the handwriting on the wall and just decided, let's get this out of here. But maybe it wasn't there. Maybe it was right after Solomon. I'd have to go back and see where's the last time they did anything with the Ark of the Covenant. It had to be treated so carefully. If you remember how David was careless with it and a man died, the ark was being carried in a cart and it started to fall and a man touched it and Uzziah died and David was upset. Not at the man so much as the fact that it was carelessly done. It was supposed to be carried in a different way. We don't have that here. They certainly would have discussed it. They would have said, look what we found. We've got their great seat, their great throne. We're going to take that and sit on it ourselves. Now remember, that's what's going to happen in the future with what we call the Antichrist. Is he will make peace with all the nations. He will lift up Israel. They will rebuild their temple. They will consecrate it. But then right before, they're going to have the Ark of the Covenant. But before it happens, he's going to proclaim himself God and go in and sit on the throne. So that's going to come back. They talk about the pillars and how it was taken down, the cafeters, that we discussed that earlier when we talked about how they built the pillars and how they gave them different names like Jabin and I think it's Joktan and Boaz, or Jabin and Boaz. I'd have to go look and see. But we're talking about destroying the temple here and all the pomegranates. And they took the priests and they killed all the priests. So we had a problem there. Not only could you not, if you even attempted to rebuild it, where are your priests? Where are your priests to kind of officiate? So this wasn't going to happen. So they came and he took the city, a eunuch, which in charge of the men of war. He found them and he brought them. Says that he took out of the city a eunuch, which in charge of the men of war, and the king's persons with them. And he mustered the people of the land, and 60 men of the people that were found in the midst of the city. So he went, and the king of Babylon smote them and put them to death in Riblah. Now, Riblah is the same place. I said Ramah. I meant Riblah when I was talking earlier about Zedekiah being killed. He was killed in Riblah. And so that's where these men were killed. These men were killed, not men's. These men were killed. And the king of Babylon smote them in Riblah. And this is the people whom Nebuchadnezzar carried away, and he came back every year. He wouldn't let them build up large numbers. He wouldn't let them build up large numbers. As the residue was there and Jews were kind of filtering in, he would come back and take them away. Thus, in the 7th year, he took 3,000 Jews, or 3,023. In the 18th year, he came back and took 832. And in the 23rd year, he came back and he took 745. So about every decade he would come in and take people away, just so this wouldn't get a lot of traction. And in the 7th and 30th year of the captivity of Jehoiachin, in the 12th month and the 25th day of the month, Evil-Merodach, king of Babylon. I'm going to have to look at that and see. That might be another name for Nebuchadnezzar. You know how sometimes people had two names? You had Ahasuerus and Artaxerxes, the same person, different ways. It could be that, and we've seen this with some of the kings here, but it could be that he didn't mind being called Evil-Merodach because it was a sense of power, a sense of lording over. He maybe saw it as a compliment. So, but that's what this is. And he makes Jehoiachin, he takes him out, he lifts up his head out of captivity, and he speaks kindly unto him, and set his throne above the thrones of the kings that were in Babylon. Now, he wasn't ruling. He was still kind of a king over a region, but he wasn't a king like the king of a nation. He wasn't like an ambassador. He was just, maybe this person saw his power or something. And again, we've got two other men coming into play, of course. Ezekiel and Jeremiah come into play in these years. Ezekiel and Daniel come into play. So how they affect, that later on we see Nebuchadnezzar, things happening to him. We see things happening where he, lost his mind for a while and he went off and lived with the animals. He grew, his nails were like talons, and his hair became like, an eagle's feathers or something, just so wild and untamed. And he was out of his mind for a while because he lifted himself up. We'll get to that story. But it could be that some of this is leaning on this, because remember, that was 35 years in. They were 70 years. So halfway through, we're looking, years down the road. Many of the stuff that talk about with Jeremiah was happening only within the first 3 to 5 years or so. And then we start chronicling here what happened on the 7th year, 8th year, 18th year, 23rd year, and then on the 35th year. So we're going down the road. We still haven't hit 70. We're halfway there. So we're going to see this progress and how the power of God is seen, and this evil Merodach lifts up this king. And again, the other kings later on with Darius and Cyrus, who saw the power of the God of these people and wanted that God on their side. So we have him speaking kindly. He changed his prison garments. So, okay, he was in prison, but, gruel, he's probably treated differently, but not like the average Jew. But changed his garments, and he had him for his diet, was a continual diet before him, given to him by the king of Babylon, every day in his portion, all the days of his life. Again, maybe even saw that honoring the king of the Jews was good to get the God of the Jews on his side. It's funny how the enemies of God saw God as powerful, more powerful than those who were his people. Those who his people didn't see him as that powerful. He couldn't protect them. Well, they'll go to foreign gods, yet you see the respect. Like I said, when people passed by Jerusalem afterwards it became a desolation, they would hiss and they would moan and they would sigh and say, what happened here? And the other guy would say, their God turned against them because they turned against him. They never say, well, they had a weak God, or, well, they were just a weak people. So that's the end of Jeremiah, and going into in Ezekiel. But just to dovetail this third, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel are like a trilogy. You have to read them as a trilogy. I was in a church that tried to jump into Ezekiel. If you don't understand what happened in Jeremiah, you're not going to understand Ezekiel. And even some of the things in Daniel are tied back to Jeremiah. So understanding Jeremiah and Isaiah are key for moving on. This moving through the book, one chapter at a time, beginning to end, cradle to grave, Genesis to, and I'm going to say to Nehemiah, because Malachi is not the last book historically. And then we're going to look at, in the New Testament, starting with the book of James, working to Revelation, in a sense of revelation. What was revealed first? So what book was first canonized in the New Testament church? So we're going to do that, but right now we're finishing Jeremiah, but a wonderful book. Go back and glean through it. You'll see wonderful things. Thank you.